I'm Christian Jackin, and I want to talk briefly about liquid democracy and also about electronic voting machines in Brazil. I have lived for many years in Brazil, and this is how I became involved with electronic voting. And it was extremely frustrating to see how, on the one side, the technology friendliness of Brazilians, of the population, was used to impose on them by a central managed way on a federal level, impose on them voting technology which cannot even be tested by the technical personnel of political parties, and the society as a whole cannot send anyone to see if things are being made in a correct way. And so more than in the US, it is a huge threat. And interesting is to know that electronic voting started much earlier in Brazil than in the US, or perhaps not necessarily historically, but when the Brazilian election of the presidential election of 2002 already was conducted with almost 100% of electronic voting machines. And currently, although the software is said to be mostly Brazilian, major suppliers are Microsoft with Windows CE and Diebold. But it is advertised as mainly being Brazilian technology. And in fact, the system running on it, beside the operating system, was developed mainly in Brazil, but if it's not open, if it cannot be verified, then it's not an acceptable solution. Well, so to make the bridge to liquid democracy, probably some of you were at the Emergent Democracy speech of yesterday, and liquid democracy is about more participatory democracy. It's about finding tools to letting many people participate without it becoming a mess, without democracy becoming a mess. And so it also has to do, of course, with electronic voting technology. So when we eventually come to a point where we have algorithms or code which enables us to do certain things online with a reasonable degree of safety, we can think of many interesting enhancements to the democracy, like that deputies or congressmen don't have to be elected for fixed terms. But it can happen dynamically. People can choose at any time who they trust.
1 minute left.
And thank you. And so, for example, if you choose to trust to pass a certain voting power to someone you trust, then that person could pass on this voting power to someone else that person trusts. So whole new ways of leadership can emerge by this, and will be very interesting to see what impacts it produces. Also on a very small level, for example, in NGOs, in Vereine, in associations, all kinds of organizations. And our provisional website is www.conevo.org. That stands for Conscious Evolution. So CONEVO.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions? If not, I'm close. Oh, sorry.
Well, it's more like a comment. Many years ago, well, 5 or 6 years ago, before I became a peer-to-peer researcher, I actually worked in the EU e-voting project, working with electronic voting systems. And we who worked there actually more or less proved that electronic voting can never be made safe. All systems anyone could think up was hackable. So the existing paper systems we use in Europe today are much, much more safer than any e-voting system we could come up with or anyone else have come up with. So many of us who worked with it left the project because we thought it was silly, because e-voting is dangerous. That's what we think. So I would like to say to everyone, if the government tries to force you to e-vote in the government election, don't e-vote. Use paper. It's safer.
Yeah. Definitely, we don't want anyone to be forced to use electronic voting methods, and paper voting should always be preserved as at least as a backup, and also we admit voting machines, but if there is a paper audit trail, and but there are interesting ideas about how to use, for example, RSA on electronic voting by distributing the keys in a way that that votes can be, or decisions can be made publicly accessible, for example on the Usenet, and that there would be tools providing that anyone could check the validity of the postings while preserving the privacy, of course, if the person posting them is using a anonymized gateway in order to post them online. So that is something we are also working on in our software implementation of liquid democracy, which again you can find at conevo.org. Thank you.
Okay.